The answer, my friend...
Boom! Yeah, and that's like in the beginning of the movie. The political satire, it just continues to flow, like the mighty Niagara. Welcome to Movies Revisited. I'm your host, Taylor James Johnson, and today we're going to be looking at a film directed by Michael Moore. No, not Macklemore. Michael Moore, yeah, the guy who made those political documentaries back in the day, but he also made a non-documentary film, a fictional narrative called Canadian-Bacon. It is actually a perfect example of a movie you should revisit, because let me tell you, I saw this film a few years ago and I thought it was fine, I thought it was funny, it, made some jokes about how Canadians are polite, but now, in today's political climate, it actually rings more true than ever, and the jokes, they just hit harder than ever, and it just tickles my political funny bone. My funny bones on the left and funny bones on the right. Yeah! Let's see what we have to say about Canadian-Bacon.
"30 years ago, filmmaker Michael Moore released his only non-documentary feature film, Canadian-Bacon. The movie is a satirical comedy that imagines a world where the American president declares war on its closest neighbor, Canada, to boost his dwindling popularity. And, given the current state of Canadian-U.S. relations at the time of writing this video, what better time than now to revisit Moore's amusing film? The Flint, Michigan-born filmmaker has long expressed his admiration of Canada, and his movies often paint the country as a would-be role model for the U.S. He also threatened to move to Canada after the release of his controversial anti-Trump documentary, Farenheit 11/9, in 2018, for fear of a reactionary backlash to the film.
How the f*** did this happen?
However, it's Moore's film from 30 years ago that's pretty much a purely fictional commentary on the U.S. political system that is still relevant today. Moore has long been an advocate of raising awareness to injustices that are close to his heart. But just how closely does Canadian-Bacon mirror the current relationship between Canada and the U.S.? Plus, does it still hold up after all these years? Let's find out here on Movies Revisited.
They're just Canadians. Yeah, they're practically the 51st state. We admired them. Clean streets, no crime, no minorities. How'd they do that?
Michael Moore's inspiration for the movie came from the pro-war sentiment and 90% approval rating for President George H.W. Bush during the Gulf War at the start of the 1990s. The conflict led Moore to wonder if the president could gain public support for war on any country he chose to invade, including Canada. In fact, Moore wrote the screenplay during the first Gulf War in reaction to what he felt was the U.S. government's manipulation of the media in supporting Operation Desert Storm. Also, by the time he came to find a production company, Moore found that nobody wanted to produce a movie that pitted the U.S. and Canada at loggerheads. He was turned down by 47 different film companies before Madonna's Maverick Productions came to the rescue and picked up the option on the movie. The film features a stellar cast of iconic actors from the era. The late, great Canadian John Candy plays Niagara Sheriff Bud Boomer. He's not only anti-Canada, but his morals are left in no doubt when he's introduced in the movie alongside Cheers veteran Rhea Perlman. Jobless and suicidal, former employees of the Hacker Factory are throwing themselves into Niagara Falls, and Bud and Perlman's honey are picking up an extra income by fishing their bodies out of the water. It's actually more amusing than it sounds.
Job! Job! Job!
The movie also features legendary MASH actor Alan Alda as the hapless president, whose name is only ever referred to as the President of the United States. He blunders his way through speeches.
It's time to turn off that war machine and turn on our children.
Is almost blown up by a missile launcher and fails in his attempts to goad the Russians into starting a new conflict. The excellent 90s character actor Kevin Pollak plays the president's scheming national security advisor, while the superbly named Rip Torn, most famous for playing Zed in Men in Black, is General Dick Panzer. We're also treated to some fun cameos from Jim Belushi, Wallace Shawn, director Michael Moore as a gun-toting anti-Canadian.
It's time we put America back in North America! God bless Bud Boomer!
plus Dan Aykroyd, who shines in one of the movie's funniest scenes.
I do have to fine you. That'll be $1,000 Canadian, or 10 American dollars if you'd prefer.
Oh, no, I'll pay the American there, yeah.
The movie was shot during fall 1993, and filming locations included Niagara Falls, Ontario, and Toronto Hamilton. Niagara Falls, New York was also used for some sequences. 12 Mile Creek and St. Catharines was actually used for the scenes that show the rapids of the Niagara River, while the Parkwood Estate in Oshawa was used as the site for the White House. Other locations of note in the movie include the scene when the American characters look longingly over the Niagara River to their U.S. home is actually them looking across Burlington Bay at Stelco's Steelworks in Hamilton, Ontario. Canadian Bacon is an example of filmmaking that is very much of its era, but somehow also manages to unintentionally foreshadow political events that are happening between the US and Canada at the time of producing this video. John Candy was very much a household name before his untimely death in 1994, a year before the release of Moore's film. Movies such as Splash, Uncle Buck, Spaceballs, and of course, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles showcased the late actor's charm and perfect comedy timing. It's a shame, then, that the last two movies featuring the actor were the poorly received Wagons East and the fun but erratic Canadian Bacon. Thankfully, Candy is in reliably great form as Sheriff Bud Boomer, and his game performance elevates the movie above its otherwise mid-range madcap levels. The plot, as we mentioned earlier in the video, focuses on Alda's struggling president who, after being goaded and persuaded by his closest confidants, declares war on the United States' unoffending neighbor, Canada. This is all set just after the closure of Hacker Dynamics, a weapons manufacturer owned by military businessman R.J. Hacker. The city of Niagara Falls is up in arms due to the closure, with jobs lost and desperate former employees either venting their fury at Hacker or taking their own lives by jumping into the falls, which is where Candy's Sheriff Boomer is making a profit on the side, of course. Boomer becomes fully embroiled in the plot after he amusingly starts a riot at a hockey game between the two nations by criticizing Canadian beer.
I'll tell you another thing, the beer sucks.
It's one of the better gags in the movie, as there's so much worse insults being thrown from the US hockey fans. But it takes a slur against beer to make the Canadian fans go wild. It's the kind of joke that wouldn't seem out of place in a Naked Gun movie, which of course featured the legendary Canadian actor Leslie Nielsen.
Trevor.
Frank.
You're both right.
The riot is the inciting incident that drives the narrative and pits both nations against each other. It also encourages Bud, who seems to have the tenacity of a Rottweiler, but the intelligence of a newborn basset hound, to declare war on the US. This leads to his girlfriend, Honey, being captured when they cross the river to litter Canada, and she becomes the first real hostage of the conflict. To mention any more about the plot would spoil what is essentially a fun, flawed, scattershot, but ultimately decent movie from an era when this type of comedy was popular. Mildly amusing is the best way to describe it. And while there are a couple of sequences that are genuinely funny, it doesn't make the most of its premise. Some gags land well, while others fall flat. And after a while, the jabs about Canada wear a tad thin.
I don't know what you're talking about. Hey.
A boot. It's about what we're talking about.
Not only does the beer get a roasting, but so does their language.
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our Joe Blow channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
Admittedly, however, some of the cultural references do lead to some amusing moments. When the US president entertains his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Khrushchev, at the White House, he orders extra large buckets of Hacker's fried chicken, a blatant KFC gag for his guests to devour. There's also further jabs at Canada's notorious friendly demeanor. A CIA agent discusses how Americans don't fear Canadians. Kevin Pollak's smarmy national security advisor also gets some decent lines, and in one scene is shown with a chart and declares that, quote, Canada owns more of the US than any other country, end quote. In another neat piece of satirical humor, the The film includes a montage of Canadians who have infiltrated America. The list of infiltrators includes William Shatner, Michael J. Fox, Peter Jennings, Morley Safer, Raymond Burr, Louis B. Mayer, Ivan Reitman, Tommy Chong, Monty Hall, Mike Myers, Alex Trebek, Warren Green, Rick James, Leonard Cohen, Mary Pickford, Rich Little, Paul Anka, and misspelled Leslie Nielsen and John Kenneth Galbraith. I guess if the movie was made now, they'd throw Jim Carrey, Ryan Reynolds, Keanu Reeves, Seth Rogen, and Ryan Gosling in the mix also. While the notion of a phony war with Canada, concocted to distract the United States from its economic woes, is the amusing premise behind Canadian Bacon, it's great to revisit a movie with just enough political bite to mirror the current tensions between the nations. The choice of Canadian Bacon as the title reinforces the film's theme of cultural misunderstandings and comedic exaggeration, and Moore himself admitted that he chose the name to appeal to a U.S. audience. "I picked it for an American audience," said Moore. "If we went to war with Canada, what would we call it? Operation Canadian Bacon." Ultimately, the movie serves as a reminder that John Candy was a hugely talented performer. And although it misses the mark with its gags more than it hits them, it's a timely reminder of how political tensions can easily escalate. Polygram Filmed Entertainment had initially organized for the film's distribution to be handled by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer in the fall of 1994. However, Polygram wrestled the rights back from MGM when they teamed up with Universal Pictures in 1993 to create their own distribution company, Gramercy Pictures. The film had a limited release in cinemas in 1995, before it quickly went straight to home entertainment. It opened in 14 theaters and ultimately grossed almost $164,000. Sadly, the movie didn't fare too well with critics, and on Rotten Tomatoes, if you take any notice of that particular site, it has a lowly approval rating of 17% based upon reviews from 18 critics. Some of the more negative comments focused on the movie's uneven tone and a third act which doesn't hold up well enough. In all fairness, however, it's an amusing movie to revisit, if not only for Candy's performance, but also some fun cameos and a predictably great turn from Alan Alda. Director Michael Moore is arguably better suited to documentary filmmaking, but if nothing else, Canadian Bacon further enhances his reputation as a filmmaker with edgy politics always at the forefront of his narrative.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. Joe Blow was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.